The hall at Street Mary Mead buzzed with polite chatter. Teacups clinked. Plates of sandwiches passed hand to hand. It was meant to be an ordinary village afternoon. Miss Marple sat near the window, her needles clicking. Her sharp blue eyes missed very little. Mrs. Clement, the vicar's wife, fussed over the cups. "Do try the seed cake. I baked it only this morning." A smile, too bright. Hands that trembled just slightly. Mrs. Weatherby, flustered as always, fanned herself. The heat in this hall, positively dreadful. Her pale blue wool dangled awkwardly, shapeless. Across the table, Miss Haydock sat stiff and upright. Severe face, iron grey hair pulled tight. She rarely spoke. But when she did, her words cut sharp. The newest resident, Mrs. Blackwood, commanded the room. Her silver hair gleamed, her voice low, precise, practiced. She spoke of London theatres, of actors, of secrets long ago. At her side, a young woman listened intently. Philippa Hayes, new to the village, a garden designer by trade. Quiet, but restless. When Mrs. Blackwood's gaze landed on her, she flushed, eyes lowered to her knitting. The wool trembled in her hands. Miss Marple noticed. Of course she noticed. "Such a charming gathering," Mrs. Blackwood declared. Her smile lingered on each face. "Here in the village, one sees everything so clearly. Nothing remains hidden for long." A pause. The words sank in. No one moved. Then laughter from Mrs. Weatherby, a nervous trill. "Yes, yes, so true. Everyone knows everything here." But the tension did not vanish. It clung to the air like smoke. Later, as coats were fetched and goodbyes exchanged, another moment unsettled Miss Marple. Mrs. Blackwood handed Miss Haydock her coat, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. "I feel certain we've met before. Your face, it is remarkably familiar." Miss Haydock stiffened. "I don't believe so. You must be mistaken." Her hand trembled as she fastened her buttons. Miss Marple's needles had fallen silent. She watched, quiet, measuring. The others chatted on about roses, weather, and parish duties. But for Miss Marple, the air in the hall had shifted. Not ordinary. Not at all. She walked home slowly as dusk gathered, her mind already weaving the threads. One face flushed, one hand trembled, and Mrs. Blackwood's words, "Nothing remains hidden for long." Miss Marple paused at her gate. In the fading light, she saw something glint on the path. Small, silver. She bent to pick it up. A knitting needle. And it was not hers. Morning light fell over Street Mary Mead. The village looked peaceful. But Miss Marple's thoughts were not. She laid the knitting needle on her table. It was smooth, polished, finely made. Not her own. Someone had dropped it, carelessly or deliberately. Florence, her maid, brought tea. "Strange thing, that needle," she said, eyeing it. Miss Marple only smiled faintly. "Strange things often lead to stranger truths, Florence." By mid-morning, word had spread. Mrs. Blackwood's knitting circle was the talk of the lane. Everyone praised her elegance, her grace, her charm. Yet underneath the praise, Miss Marple caught whispers. Miss Weatherby told Mrs. Clement that Mrs. Blackwood had been someone important once. A lady on the stage, a woman with a past. Mrs. Clement shushed her quickly, her face pinched, her tone sharp. "We mustn't gossip." But her eyes betrayed something else. Fear, or recognition. Miss Marple filed it away. At the post office she overheard more. Mr. Lyle, the postmaster, leaned across the counter. A letter came for her. London stamp. Thick envelope. Special delivery. His voice dropped. She signed with a shaking hand, pale as paper. Miss Marple asked gently, "And where was the letter from, Mr. Lyle?" He blinked. "Couldn't say, miss, but it had the mark of a solicitor. A letter from a lawyer." Interesting. That afternoon, she walked past Dr. Haydock's house. He stood at the gate, talking with his sister, Miss Haydock. Their voices carried. "You can't leave now," he said firmly. "It would look suspicious." "I have reasons," she snapped. Her hand pressed to her coat. Her eyes darted, nervous. Miss Marple coughed softly as she passed. Both turned. Faces quickly smoothed into polite smiles. "Good day, Miss Marple," Dr. Haydock called. "Good day," she replied, but her mind sharpened. Something was pressing on this village. Something old. Something hidden. By evening, gossip had thickened, like mist. Mrs. Weatherby swore she saw Mrs. Blackwood in tears as she closed her curtains. Philippa Hayes had been spotted near Gossington Hall, though she denied it. And Mrs. Clement, usually calm, was short-tempered with the choir ladies. Miss Marple listened, watched, waited. She sat by her fire, knitting in hand, replaying each detail. Mrs. Blackwood's pointed words. Miss Haydock's denial. Philippa's flush. The solicitor's letter. Threads, all tangled, waiting to be drawn tight. The fire crackled. The clock ticked. Florence came in with her evening tray. "Will you want the curtains closed, ma'am?" "Yes, Florence," Miss Marple said softly. Her gaze lingered on the silver knitting needle, a piece of someone else's puzzle. She thought of Mrs. Blackwood's smile at the tea table, of the way her eyes had fixed on Philippa, and the way Miss Haydock's hand had trembled as she fastened her coat. Miss Marple's needles clicked once, twice, then stopped. Her lips pressed into a thin line. But why did her hand tremble? Dawn broke grey over Street Mary Mead. Mist hung low, curling across hedges. The village was quiet, too quiet. At 7:30, Edith, Mrs. Blackwood's maid, hurried up the drive to Gossington Hall. She carried the breakfast tray, hot tea, toast. Her shoes tapped against the stone. She pushed open the library door. Her scream rang out. Within the hour, Inspector Craddock arrived. 2 constables followed. The hall swarmed with whispers. Florence the cook wrung her hands. The gardener stood pale by the door. Miss Marple, summoned quickly, entered with calm steps. Craddock greeted her with a nod. "Miss Marple, I value your eye." She inclined her head. "Show me, Inspector." The library smelled of stale smoke and roses. Mrs. Blackwood sat slumped in a deep chair near the bay window. Her silver hair gleamed in the weak light. Her head bent forward unnaturally. Her knitting lay across her lap. A ball of wool rested by her feet, unwound, trailing like a snake across the carpet. Craddock's voice was low. "She is quite dead. Sometime in the night." Edith sobbed into her apron. "I found her just so, sir. I swear I didn't touch a thing." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. She leaned closer. The knitting, a complex pattern, intricate loops, perfect stitches. But only yesterday, Mrs. Blackwood had claimed she worked on a plain scarf. Strange. The inspector pointed. "Cause of death is obvious. Needle through the neck, driven with force. Instant, the doctor says." Miss Marple studied the still hands. They held the needles neatly, as if mid-row. No sign of struggle. Odd. Philippa Hayes appeared in the doorway, pale as chalk. Her voice trembled. "Is it true? She's dead?" Craddock stepped forward. "Miss Hayes, you were acquainted with her?" She nodded quickly. "Yes, from the knitting circle. She was kind to me. Who could do such a thing?" Her eyes dropped. Her hands clenched. Miss Haydock soon followed, stiff as always. She gasped, then hardened. A dreadful end. But she was a woman who stirred trouble. Mark my words. Her brother, Dr. Haydock, silenced her with a glare. "This is no time for such talk." Mrs. Clement entered last, her face pale, her lips pressed thin. "Oh, Inspector, how terrible. Murder, in our village again." She clutched her rosary beads. Her knuckles were white. Craddock turned to the group. "None of you must leave. I'll need statements, every one of you." Miss Marple moved quietly about the room. Her fingers brushed the edge of the tapestry bag by the chair, neatly arranged. Too neat. Not what one expected after a sudden death. Her eyes shifted to the mantel. Something was missing. Yesterday, Mrs. Blackwood had worn a brooch. Silver, dark blue background. Not on her now. Not in sight. Miss Marple straightened. Her gaze swept the room. Every detail mattered. Every silence spoke. She whispered to herself, and the weapon was lying in plain sight. Inspector Craddock paced the length of the library. His notebook snapped open. His pen scratched quickly. Death was clean, Dr. Haydock reported. Instant. Needle pierced a vital spot. It required precision. Miss Marple stood by the chair. Her knitting needles rested in her hands, unmoving. Her eyes swept the room. She touched the wool draped across Mrs. Blackwood's lap. Such intricate work, she murmured. Yet yesterday she claimed she never managed complicated patterns. Curious, don't you think? Craddock frowned. You're saying this knitting may not be hers? I merely say it is unlikely, Miss Marple replied softly. The constable stepped forward with a tray of collected items. Inspector, found these on the side table. Teacup, saucer, half a biscuit. Craddock sniffed the cup. Faint odor, not her usual tea. He made a note. Miss Marple leaned closer. Smell of a sleeping draught, light but unmistakable. She was given something to make her drowsy. Craddock's brow furrowed. So she may have been drugged first, then killed. At the hearth, another constable called out. Sir, ashes disturbed. Fire burned last night, but no wood kept in the scuttle. Someone cleared it. Or destroyed something, Craddock muttered. Miss Marple's gaze shifted to the window. The latch was undone. Fresh mud near the sill. Someone came or went, she said. Through the garden? Or staged it to look that way, she answered. Philippa Hayes, pale and restless, was brought in for questioning. Craddock's tone was brisk. Where were you last evening? She hesitated. At home. I worked late in the garden. Anyone confirm that? She shook her head. No, I live alone. Her fingers twisted the hem of her sleeve. Miss Marple noticed. Fear, not guilt. Miss Haydock entered next. Inspector, this is all a waste of time. The woman had enemies, no doubt, but not from our circle. Her words were sharp, her hands clenched at her sides. Mrs. Clement followed, quiet, eyes lowered. I cannot bear such scenes. Must we stand here gawping at death? Craddock's gaze flicked to her trembling hands. Yes, madam, until I have answers. He turned to Miss Marple. Tell me what strikes you first. She glanced at the body, the wool, the empty mantle. Her brooch, she said simply. Yesterday she wore it proudly. Now it is gone. Craddock scribbled quickly. Motive robbery, perhaps. Miss Marple's head tilted. Or something far more personal. The constable returned with Edith, the maid. Inspector, she insists her mistress dismissed her early last night. Said she wished to be alone. Craddock's pen froze. Dismissed at what time? 8:30, sir. Miss Marple's eyes sharpened. Her needles clicked once, then stilled. 8:30, she repeated. The inspector nodded. Yes. Why? She looked from the maid, to the clock on the mantel, to the body slumped in the chair. Her voice was soft, but firm. But the timeline didn't fit. Inspector Craddock called the group together in the library. His voice was sharp. We begin with facts. A missing brooch, a poisoned cup, a needle driven with skill, and a maid dismissed at 8:30. Eyes shifted, feet shuffled, the air grew tight. He fixed on Timothy Blackwood, the nephew. The young man sat pale but composed. You arrived from London yesterday. Why? Timothy swallowed. My aunt sent for me. She sounded distressed, begged me to come at once. Craddock leaned forward. And what did you discuss? Timothy hesitated. She said she feared someone from her past, someone in this village. Murmurs spread across the room. Miss Haydock's eyes narrowed. Convenient, she snapped. She feared, and then she died. And here sits her heir. All eyes turned. Timothy flushed. I had nothing to gain from her death. Craddock's voice was cold. You inherit Gossington Hall. The fortune. The estate. Is that not gain enough? Timothy rose to his feet. Inspector, you're twisting this. She wanted me to stay here. She said I would understand once she explained, but she never had the chance. Craddock's pen scratched furiously. Motive means opportunity. You were here last night. Timothy shook his head. No, I arrived late. After 10. Ask the driver who brought me from the station. The inspector nodded to a constable. Check it. Miss Marple's needles clicked faintly. She watched Timothy. His voice trembled, but his eyes earnest. Not the look of a killer. Mrs. Clement spoke softly. Inspector, may I say something? Craddock gave a curt nod. Her hands clutched her rosary. Timothy came to see me before supper. He asked if I might speak to his aunt on his behalf. He was worried she had enemies. He feared she might be blackmailed. A stir in the room. Blackmail. The word hung heavy. Craddock snapped. Enemies? Who? Did he name anyone? Mrs. Clement shook her head. No, only that he feared someone from her stage days. Philippa? Hayes flinched. Her eyes dropped quickly to her lap. The inspector caught it. Miss Hayes, do you know something? She stammered. No, nothing. Only gossip. Miss Haydock's voice cut in sharp. Inspector, you waste time. The nephew stood to gain everything. Wealth. Property. Why look further? Craddock's pen halted. He studied Timothy again. The picture was too neat, too simple. Miss Marple's needles stopped. Her voice, calm but firm, broke the silence. Yes, he gains much. Yes, suspicion fits him well, but does it not fit too well? Her eyes lifted, blue and piercing. Unless someone wanted us to believe it was them. The constable returned just before noon. He cleared his throat. Inspector, I spoke to the driver. He swears he dropped Mr. Timothy Blackwood at Gossington Hall after 10:30. Alone. No one met him. No one followed. Craddock's brows lifted. So, the maid was dismissed at 8:30, and the nephew arrived 2 hours later. That leaves a gap wide enough for murder. Timothy clenched his fists. I told you, Inspector, I came because she called me. Why would I kill her before she could explain? Perhaps, Craddock said dryly, because you already knew the explanation. A sharp intake of breath came from Mrs. Weatherby. Her fluttery hands shook. I saw something last night. All heads turned. Her voice wavered. I was on my walk, as I always do on Tuesdays. Just as the lamps lit, I passed the garden gate of Gossington Hall, and I swear I saw Mr. Blackwood slip inside. Timothy paled. That's a lie! But Mrs. Weatherby pressed her hands to her chest. No, I swear it. He had his coat collar high. He looked over his shoulder. Then he went in. I know what I saw. The inspector's eyes gleamed. Very well. That puts you at the scene, Mr. Blackwood. Before the time you claim. Timothy's voice broke. No. The driver, but his protest faltered. Miss Marple studied Mrs. Weatherby. Her eyes were wide, nervous, darting. Not certain, not steady. She spoke gently. My dear, did you notice the time? Mrs. Weatherby hesitated. Well, I thought it was near 10, but perhaps earlier. My watch is never reliable. Craddock cut in. Near 10 would fit perfectly. Enough time for him to kill her before the driver brought him back. Timothy groaned. This is madness. Miss Haydock crossed her arms. Not madness. Proof. The boy was seen. But Miss Marple's needles clicked softly. Her voice stayed calm. Mrs. Weatherby, you said you take your walk every Tuesday. At dusk. You see, dusk comes much earlier this time of year. Not at 10. Not even close. The spinster flushed crimson. Well, perhaps I misjudged. But it was him, I tell you. I saw him go through the garden. Craddock shut his notebook. Misjudged or not, it places him here. Miss Marple frowned. She looked at Timothy. She looked at the maid's account. She looked at the library clock, still set to 9. Something was wrong. She whispered under her breath. Then who was really with her last night? The library felt colder that afternoon. Inspector Craddock stood by the mantel, frowning at his notes. Miss Marple sat quietly, her needles moving with steady rhythm. At last she spoke. There is something here that troubles me more than testimony, Inspector. Craddock looked up. Go on. The brooch, she said simply. Yesterday, at the knitting circle, Mrs. Blackwood wore a cameo brooch. Distinctive. Silver setting. Dark blue background. Everyone noticed it. And today, her needles stopped. Her eyes lifted. It is gone. Craddock's pen froze. You're certain? I never forget jewelry, Miss Marple replied softly, particularly when it carries meaning. She touched it often, as if it reminded her of someone. The inspector barked orders. Search the house. Every drawer, every box. Speak to the servants. Constables moved quickly. Drawers opened, trunks dragged, cupboards emptied, nothing. Edith, the maid, wrung her hands. She wore it after supper, sir. I polished it myself only last week. She said it was precious. Precious how? Craddock pressed. Edith faltered. She didn't say. Only that it had belonged to a man. Long ago. Miss Marple's eyes flickered toward Philippa Hayes. The young woman stiffened, then bent her head. Craddock turned sharply. Miss Hayes, do you know of this brooch? Philippa shook her head too quickly. No, nothing. Why should I? Miss Haydock's voice cut in, cold. She lies. I saw her glance at it yesterday as if she knew it. Philippa flushed scarlet. Her voice trembled. I only admired it. That is all. But the tremor in her hands betrayed her. Craddock's jaw tightened. This brooch may be the key, taken in anger, or stolen to silence a truth. He faced the group. Until it is found, every one of you remains under suspicion. Mrs. Clement clasped her rosary tighter. Her lips moved, whispering words too faint to hear. Timothy's voice rose, shaking. My aunt spoke of the brooch last night. She said she would pass it on. She pressed my hand, but when I left her, she was still wearing it. Craddock leaned forward. You admit you saw her alive after 8? Yes. Briefly. She seemed frightened. She said... He stopped himself. She said what? The inspector demanded. Timothy's voice broke. She said the brooch was proof, that it linked her to the past. She wouldn't explain more. Silence pressed on the room. Miss Marple's needles stilled. Her eyes shone with a quiet certainty. The brooch was the symbol, she murmured. The message. Perhaps the reason for her death. She looked again at the lifeless figure in the chair. At the empty space where silver should have gleamed. Her voice was low, steady, final. And it was missing from the victim's body. Rain drummed softly against Miss Marple's window. She sat in her chair, knitting untouched on her lap. Her mind worked faster than her needles. The brooch, the missing brooch. It was not simple theft. It was memory, a token from long ago. She rose, took her umbrella, and walked to the vicarage. Mrs. Clement welcomed her politely, though her eyes looked shadowed. How dreadful, Miss Marple. Our village tainted again by death. Miss Marple's smile was kind. Yes, dreadful indeed. One wonders how the past always has its way of finding us, even here. Mrs. Clement's hands froze on the teapot. Whatever do you mean? Only that Mrs. Blackwood spoke of her stage career. London theatres. An actress of some renown. Mrs. Clement's voice tightened. Yes, I heard. But those days are far away. Irrelevant. Miss Marple did not reply. Her gaze drifted to the mantel. Among family photographs stood a faded, framed picture. A theatre company posed stiffly on stage. Miss Marple leaned closer. How charming. Your husband has an interest in drama? Mrs. Clement flushed faintly. Oh, just a relic. My husband collected odd things in his youth. Nothing important. But Miss Marple's eyes had already fixed on a familiar face in the photograph. Elaine Blackwood smiling, radiant, young. Beside her, another woman. Severe, grey eyes. Much younger then, but unmistakable. Miss Marple turned back. You must allow me to borrow this photograph. Such village history should not be forgotten. Mrs. Clement's smile did not reach her eyes. Of course, but it is only dust and shadows, Miss Marple. Later in her cottage, Miss Marple studied the photograph under lamplight. Names were scrawled on the back. Elaine Blackwood, Richard Hayes, the director, and two others, Helen Haydock, Margaret Fitzwilliam. The names stirred old memories. She remembered a scandal, whispered in newspapers 20 years past, a director's suicide, a broken marriage, a woman who vanished, the brooch given by a husband to his mistress, the mistress wearing it still, and the wife somewhere hidden, waiting. Miss Marple's lips pressed into a thin line. It was not robbery. It was vengeance. The past clawing through to the present. Florence entered with a tray. "You've been staring at that old picture for an hour, ma'am. What is it you see?" Miss Marple did not answer at once. Her fingers traced one name again and again. Margaret Fitzwilliam. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Her name was in the old photograph. Inspector Craddock returned to Miss Marple's cottage the next morning. He carried a slim folder under his arm. His face was set, tired, but determined. "We searched her desk," he began without preamble. "In the bottom drawer we found papers, old playbills, contracts, and this." He slid a torn sheet onto the table. The ink had faded, but the words struck sharp. "Your secret. Substantial compensation." Silence. Miss Marple read slowly. Her fingers tapped the edge of the paper. "Blackmail, Inspector." Craddock nodded grimly. "It seems likely. Someone paid her, or refused to, enough to put her life at risk." Florence hovered with the teapot. Her eyes widened. "Blackmail? In Street Mary Mead?" Miss Marple gave her a small smile. "Human nature, Florence, is not confined by place." Craddock leaned forward. "Timothy swears he knew nothing of it. He claims his aunt was always secretive about money, but this," he tapped the paper, "this speaks of an old scandal. Someone close, someone desperate to keep it buried." Miss Marple's eyes softened. Elaine Blackwood was not just a hostess. She was a woman who lived on shadows. Secrets follow such people. Craddock opened the folder again. "We also spoke with Miss Haydock. She admits she knew Mrs. Blackwood from theatre days, said she wanted no part of it now. But she looked pale when I mentioned a letter." Miss Marple's needles clicked once, then stilled. She recognized the handwriting, perhaps. Craddock frowned. "You think it was addressed to her? Or written by her?" Miss Marple said softly, though I doubt she would be so careless. At that moment, Edith, the maid, entered with downcast eyes. "Inspector, I found this while changing the bed linens. It was under the mattress." She held out a folded paper, crumpled and yellowed. Craddock unfolded it carefully. A different hand this time. The words leapt from the page. "I cannot endure your demands. Richard will not forgive. I will end this." Craddock's jaw tightened. He looked at Miss Marple. "Richard? The director?" Her eyes shone with recognition. "Yes. Richard Hayes. The man who died so suddenly. His name returns like an echo." The room went still. The past pressed down heavy. Miss Marple lifted the letter closer to the lamplight. Her brow furrowed. "Something was wrong. The letter is incomplete," she whispered. Her voice trembled just slightly. Craddock leaned in. "What do you mean?" She held up the jagged edge of the page, her blue eyes fixed on the inspector's. But half the page had been torn away. Inspector Craddock called a small gathering in the sitting room at Gossington Hall. The fire was unlit. The room felt cold, though it was not the weather. He cleared his throat. "One of you has come forward. A witness. Someone who claims to have seen something that matters." The eyes of the group turned to Mrs. Weatherby. She fluttered in her chair, hands wringing. "Yes, yes. I suppose I must tell it. For truth's sake." Craddock gestured. "Speak, madam. What did you see?" Mrs. Weatherby leaned forward. Her voice was hushed, conspiratorial. "I was on my evening walk. Always the same route. Past the green, down the lane, and near the hall. I saw a figure." Her eyes widened as if reliving it. "Tall, wrapped in a long coat, slipping in through the garden door." Gasps circled the room. Craddock's pen scratched quickly. "And who was this figure?" Mrs. Weatherby's voice quavered. "I swear, it was Miss Haydock. The doctor's sister stiffened at once. "That is a falsehood," she snapped. Her cheeks flushed crimson. "I was at home all evening with my brother." "Doctor." Haydock shifted uncomfortably. "I cannot be sure. I was called to a patient in the village. She may have stepped out." The room tensed. Miss Haydock's eyes blazed. "You doubt me, brother? After all these years?" Craddock's gaze was sharp. "So, you admit she was left alone?" Dr. Haydock pressed his lips together. "Yes, briefly. But she would never—" "Never what?" Miss Weatherby interrupted. "Never stab a woman through the neck with a knitting needle." The words echoed harshly. No one spoke. Miss Marple's needles clicked softly. Her calm voice slipped through the silence. "My dear Mrs. Weatherby, you say you saw her slip into the garden. At what time exactly?" Mrs. Weatherby pressed a hand to her temple. "Oh, time. Always so fussy. Let me think. The church bell had rung, yes. 8 chimes. Just before the mist thickened." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. 8? Yes, certainly. And the lamps had just been lit in the lane. That much I remember." Craddock leaned in. "You are certain it was Tuesday night?" Mrs. Weatherby nodded vigorously. "I never miss my Tuesday walk. Regular as the clock. It was Tuesday. I swear it." Miss Marple lowered her knitting. Her gaze swept the room. Timothy shifted in his chair. Philippa stared at the floor. Mrs. Clement clasped her beads tighter. Miss Marple's voice was quiet. "Tuesday night, you say?" "Yes," Mrs. Weatherby insisted. "Tuesday without fail. I saw her go in." Miss Marple's needles stilled. Her lips curved in a faint, knowing line. She swore it was Tuesday night, but the murder happened Wednesday. Inspector Craddock rubbed his temple. Tuesday. Wednesday. The timeline was shifting like sand. Miss Marple sat quietly, knitting resting in her lap. Her eyes were fixed on Philippa Hayes. "Miss Hayes," she said gently. "Your name is unusual, Hayes. It reminds me of something. Or someone." Philippa stiffened. Color drained from her cheeks. I don't know what you mean." Craddock seized on it. "Go on, Miss Marple." Her voice stayed calm, deliberate. "Elaine Blackwood once loved a man. A director. Richard Hayes. He died in scandal. His name was whispered in every paper. And you, Miss Hayes, you bear it." Philippa's eyes filled with panic. "No, you're mistaken." Dr. Haydock shifted uneasily. "Child, is it true?" Philippa's voice broke. "Yes, he was my father." Gasps filled the room. She pressed her hands together. "I was a child when he died. My mother took me abroad. She changed our name. I grew up in Switzerland, away from the whispers, away from the shame. Only when she died did I learn the truth." Craddock leaned forward. "So you came here. Why?" Philippa lifted her chin. "To find Elaine Blackwood. To ask what really happened to my father. She destroyed him. I had to know why." Craddock's tone sharpened. "And did you confront her?" Philippa shook her head. "No. I lost my courage. But she recognized me. She knew who I was the moment she saw me. That's why she looked at me in the knitting circle." Her voice trembled. "She sent me a note, asking me to meet her. She wrote she would explain. She promised the truth about my father." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. "A note that was never found among her papers." Philippa nodded. "Yes, someone must have taken it. I never received the chance." The inspector crossed his arms. "And you expect us to believe you came here only for answers? Not revenge?" Philippa's voice rose. "I didn't kill her. I only wanted to understand." Miss Marple spoke softly. "She told Timothy the brooch was proof, that it linked her to the past. Perhaps she meant you, my dear, the daughter of Richard Hayes, the living reminder of that old scandal." Philippa's shoulders sagged. "She said she would put things right, that she would change her will. She wanted to make amends. I didn't know what she meant." Craddock's eyes lit with sudden realization. Her will. Of course. She summoned a solicitor the very next day. If she meant to change it— He turned to the group. Then Philippa stood to gain everything. The hall, the estate, the fortune. The room fell silent. Philippa's lips parted in shock. Her hands shook violently. Miss Marple's needle stopped. Her voice was quiet, but it struck like a blade. She wasn't just a guest. She was his heir. By afternoon, Inspector Craddock made his move. He stood in the great hall of Gossington. Constables flanked the door. His voice rang sharp. "Philippa Hayes, I'm placing you under arrest for the murder of Mrs. Elaine Blackwood." Gasps filled the room. Philippa staggered back. "No, you can't." "I never—" Craddock cut her off. "You had motive. Blood ties to Richard Hayes. Your father's disgrace. Your hatred for the woman who ruined him, and now inheritance. The will was to be changed in your favor." A constable stepped forward, hands ready for cuffs. Philippa shook her head wildly. "She promised me the truth. Why would I kill her before she told me?" Craddock snapped. "Because the truth condemned you." Miss Haydock muttered darkly. "I always said that girl was trouble." Mrs. Clement whispered a prayer under her breath, clutching her rosary tight. Timothy rose suddenly. "This is madness. She's no killer. My aunt may have wanted to give her everything, but Philippa had no idea until yesterday. She told me herself." Craddock's face hardened. "Convenient testimony, but it changes nothing." The constable reached for Philippa's arm. Her face turned white. Her voice cracked. "I swear I didn't harm her. I came for answers. Not money, not revenge." Miss Marple's knitting needles clicked once, twice, then stilled. Her eyes fixed calmly on the inspector. "Inspector," she said gently, "forgive me, but this feels premature." Craddock frowned. She had motive, opportunity, a letter summons, the brooch that tied her to the past. It's all here. Miss Marple's voice was steady. "Yes, and perhaps too neatly laid." Craddock bristled. "You doubt the evidence?" "Not the evidence," Miss Marple said softly, "but the arrangement of it. Letters that vanish. A brooch removed. A will rewritten. And a frightened girl with trembling hands. These are threads, Inspector, but not the pattern." Philippa's eyes filled with tears. "Please, Miss Marple, tell them. Tell them I'm innocent." Miss Haydock scoffed. "She plays the victim well." Miss Marple leaned back, thoughtful. She spoke slowly, each word deliberate. "The question is not what we see, it is why we see it so clearly. Too clearly. Murder is seldom so tidy." Craddock folded his arms. "Then who else? If not her, who?" Miss Marple's eyes drifted to the window. The garden lay still beyond. Her needles rested in her lap. She whispered, almost to herself. It was too perfect. Far too perfect. Rain had cleared by morning. The village stirred with nervous whispers. Everyone knew Philippa sat under arrest. Everyone believed the case was finished. But Miss Marple did not. Her mind kept circling one detail. The missing brooch. She visited Inspector Craddock at the station. He looked tired but firm. "We have her, Miss Marple. We have the motive, the history, the inheritance. It's all there." Miss Marple shook her head gently. "All there? Or all placed there?" Craddock frowned. "What do you mean?" "The brooch," she said simply. "Until it is found, your case remains fragile." Craddock sighed. "We've searched the hall top to bottom. Nothing." That afternoon news spread quickly. A boy had found something in the vicarage garden. Playing near the hedge, he dug at the soil. His hand closed around metal. The gardener brought it straight to the inspector. A small box caked with dirt. Inside lay the brooch. Silver setting. Dark blue background. The missing piece. Craddock's eyes lit. "Proof!" She must have hidden it before she was caught. Miss Marple's expression remained calm. "Strange proof, Inspector. Why bury such a thing? Why not sell it? Or keep it as a prize?" Craddock shrugged. "Guilt makes people foolish." Miss Marple studied the brooch carefully. No scratches, no tarnish. As if it had only just been pressed into the soil. She murmured, "Not guilt, Inspector." "A message." Craddock bristled. "A message?" "Yes. Someone wanted us to find it, to point the finger more firmly at Philippa. But why place it in the vicar's garden of all places?" He hesitated. "The vicarage, Are you sure? She nodded. The boy found it beneath the window of the sitting room. Too deliberate to be accident. Craddock's jaw tightened. Then perhaps Philippa planted it herself, to divert suspicion. Miss Marple's needles clicked once. Her voice was soft but edged. Or perhaps, Inspector, it was planted against her. The inspector studied her face. You think someone is framing her? Miss Marple's eyes did not waver. I think someone is weaving their pattern too neatly. And when a pattern is too neat, one must look for the hand guiding it. She held the brooch up to the light. It gleamed coldly, catching the sunday. Her voice dropped to a whisper. It had been hidden, in the vicar's garden. The vicarage bell tolled softly as Miss Marple stepped through the garden gate. She had come not for the vicar, but for his wife. Mrs. Clement had been quiet these past days. Too quiet. Inside, the sitting room smelled of lavender polish. Mrs. Clement sat stiffly, rosary wound tight around her fingers. Miss Marple spoke gently. I fear this business has unsettled you deeply, my dear. Mrs. Clement's lips trembled. Unsettled? It has broken me. The whispers, the suspicion, and the brooch found here, beneath my window. Do you think I could bear such a thing? Miss Marple's eyes were calm. Then perhaps you should tell me what it is you hide. For something you do hide. Silence. The clock ticked. At last Mrs. Clement's voice came, low, almost a whisper. It was not about murder. It was about shame. Her eyes filled with tears. I knew Elaine Blackwood long ago. On the stage. I was not Mrs. Clement then. I was Margaret Fitzwilliam. We were in the same production. She soared and I faltered. I left in bitterness, swearing never to see her again. Miss Marple listened without blinking. Your secret past. That is why you trembled when her name returned. Mrs. Clement nodded. Yes, my husband never knew. He believes me the daughter of a respectable family from Somerset. If the truth came out that I had been a failed actress, friend to Elaine, witness to scandal, it would ruin me. So when she came here, when I saw her again, her voice cracked. I feared exposure. I confronted her, begged her to stay silent. Miss Marple's knitting lay still in her lap. And did she promise? Mrs. Clement shook her head. No. She only smiled that knowing smile of hers. She said secrets rot when buried. She said she would tell it, all of it, in her own time. I could not bear it. She pressed her hands, together until the knuckles whitened. I quarreled with her that night. In anger I said things, cruel things. She wept. But then she dismissed me. I left before 8. I swear it. Miss Marple's eyes softened. A quarrel, not murder. Mrs. Clement's voice dropped even lower. Yes, not murder. But when I heard she was dead, I thought perhaps I killed her with my words. Perhaps grief or shame finished what I began. She clutched her rosary tighter, whispering through clenched lips. But it wasn't murder. Or was it? Inspector Craddock stood in the library, brooch on the table between them. Miss Marple sat across from him, knitting in her lap, her needles quiet. He exhaled sharply. So Mrs. Clement quarreled with her. She feared her past would come out. That's motive enough. Miss Marple tilted her head. True, but not hers alone. Craddock frowned. What do you mean? She nodded toward Timothy, who lingered near the window. The young man's face was pale, his eyes restless. Mr. Blackwood, Miss Marple said gently, you have held something back. Best speak it now. Timothy swallowed hard. I told you my aunt feared someone. That part was true. But what I didn't tell you... His voice faltered. Craddock barked. Out with it. Timothy gripped the edge of the chair. She kept a letter. From my father. A will. It left the estate to me, but she suppressed it. Said I wasn't ready. Said she would keep control until she chose otherwise. I argued with her about it. I demanded she hand it over. That night, I threatened to leave her forever. Gasps filled the room. Craddock's jaw tightened. You fought with her on the very night of her death? Timothy's voice broke. Yes. I told her she was cruel. That she held power over me for no reason. I stormed out before 9. Miss Marple's eyes glinted. So, she held secrets over more than one of you. A past career for Mrs. Clement, a suppressed will for you. Craddock's pen scratched furiously. That makes 2 strong motives. Mrs. Clement stiffened in her seat. I only begged her for silence. I never wished her dead. Timothy's hands trembled. She ruined my life, treated me like a boy when I was a man. If anyone had cause. He stopped too late. The words echoed through the room. Craddock looked between them. One quarrelled over the past. One quarrelled over the will. 2 motives. 2 opportunities. And only 1 corpse. The silence was heavy. Mrs. Weatherby dabbed her eyes. Philippa clutched the arms of her chair. Dr. Haydock stared at the floor. Miss Marple's knitting resumed softly. Her voice was calm, but it carried. She was a woman who collected debts, of love, of shame, of money, and each debt left a scar. The question, Inspector, is not who bore scars, but who decided to strike back. Craddock snapped his notebook shut. Both of them. Both had reason to kill her. Which one did? The drawing room at Gossington Hall was crowded. Chairs scraped, cups rattled. Every suspect was present. Inspector Craddock stood by the mantel, notes in hand. Miss Marple sat near the fire, knitting needles resting quietly in her lap. Her eyes swept the room, calm but sharp. Craddock cleared his throat. We shall now review the facts. Each of you will hear how the evidence fits or fails. He began briskly. Mrs. Blackwood was last seen alive at 8:30. Her maid was dismissed. That gives a window for the crime. He looked at Timothy. You admit you quarrelled with her over a will. You had motive, and you left before 9. Suspicious. Timothy's face reddened. I didn't touch her. Yes, we quarrelled, but I left in anger, not blood. Craddock turned next to Mrs. Clement. You, madam, feared exposure. You argued with her earlier. Your past on the stage. Your shame. A strong motive. Mrs. Clement clutched her rosary tighter. I begged her for silence. I said cruel things, yes. But murder? Never. The inspector's gaze shifted to Miss Haydock. You were placed at the garden door by Mrs. Weatherby. Yet the day was wrong. Tuesday instead of Wednesday. Convenient mistake. Miss Haydock's jaw tightened. I never entered that house. She lies. Mrs. Weatherby flustered. I only reported what I saw. Perhaps the days blurred. But I swear someone slipped inside. The room buzzed with nervous voices. Craddock raised his hand. Enough. We move on. The brooch found buried in the vicar's garden. Why? Hidden guilt? Or planted as false proof? Mrs. Clement's face blanched. Not by me. I knew nothing of it until the boy brought it. Miss Marple spoke softly for the first time. The brooch was not buried long. The soil was fresh. It was placed there after her death, by someone who wished suspicion to fall neatly. All eyes turned to her. She continued, calm and deliberate. Consider the timeline. Dismissed maid. Quarrels before 9. A clock set at 9. A cup laced with a draught. A missing brooch. Each piece points in a direction, yet too neatly arranged. Her needles clicked once, then stilled. Murders are rarely so tidy. When they appear so, it is because someone intends it. Craddock frowned. You mean one of them is framing the rest? Miss Marple nodded. Precisely. And that is why we must test each word spoken. Because lies have already been told. Small lies. Large lies, all to shape a story that feels complete. The fire popped in the grate. No one moved. Miss Marple's voice dropped lower, steady as steel. But one person still hasn't told the truth. The room was silent, every face tense. Miss Marple laid her knitting aside. Her eyes moved slowly from one suspect to the next. Then she spoke. Let us pull the threads together, shall we? Inspector Craddock folded his arms. All right, Miss Marple, we're listening. She nodded once. Elaine Blackwood died because of the past, but it was not Mrs. Clement's past, nor Philippa's inheritance, nor Timothy's quarrel. Each had cause. But cause alone does not kill. Timothy shifted in his chair. Then who? Miss Marple leaned forward. First, the brooch. It was never about value. It was about memory. A gift from Richard Hayes. Proof of a scandal. It vanished after her death. And then, conveniently, it was discovered in the vicar's garden. Too neat. Too staged. Mrs. Clement gasped. You mean it was planted? Indeed. By someone who wished suspicion to fall elsewhere. Someone clever. Someone practiced in deceit. Her gaze settled on Miss Haydock. The woman stiffened. Ridiculous. I was never near her. Miss Marple's voice stayed calm. But you were. Mrs.? Weatherby saw you, or thought she did. She mistook the day. Tuesday instead of Wednesday. But you were there. Not as a visitor. As a killer. Miss Haydock's face hardened. You accuse me without proof. Miss Marple's eyes glittered. There is proof. The knitting. Elaine never worked complicated patterns. Yet in death, her needles rested in a half-finished lace stitch. Too difficult for her, but not for you. You, Miss Haydock, were known for your skill. The pattern betrayed you. A murmur ran through the room. Craddock's eyes widened. Good Lord, she staged the scene. Miss Marple nodded. She drugged Elaine's tea, waited until she slept, then used her own hands to place the needles, then struck with one of them, precise, cold, and afterwards she buried the brooch here at the vicarage, a double blow, to smear Mrs. Clement. To close the circle, Miss Haydock's lips pressed tight. Her hands shook. She destroyed Richard Hayes. She ruined my sister Margaret. And you think I should let her live? No. Justice was due. Mrs. Clement cried out. Sister? You were Margaret's sister all? Along? Yes, Miss Marple said softly. That was the second secret. Margaret's shame was yours as well. You carried her bitterness, and so you killed. The inspector stepped forward. Miss Helen Haydock, you are under arrest for the murder of Elaine Blackwood. Constables moved in. Miss Haydock's face twisted. She deserved it. Every stitch of it. She was led away. Silence lingered. At last, Miss Marple picked up her needles again. Her voice was gentle, reflective. The trouble with secrets is they always unravel. A pause. The fire crackled. In the end, human frailty is the one puzzle that never changes.